Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Elizabeth Holmes. This past week, immigration agents have been in North Carolina's biggest cities, conducting sweeps that led to several hundred people being detained. Many who were detained were arrested on suspicion of being in the country illegally, but others were let go after proving to the agents that they were actually U.S. citizens. Our NC Capitol team put together a whole list of claims surrounding these sweeps and the aftermath that were either false or in dispute. One of those reporters, Will Doran, joins us now to walk us through this minefield of misinformation. Will, thanks for being here.
Nice to talk to you.
So I guess the first question that a lot of people might want to know is this even over? Did ICE get who they want and then just move on?
Well, like so much else with this whole saga, even that is in dispute. We heard from the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Sheriff, Gary McFadden. He said, the feds have told me that Operation Charlotte's Web, which is what they were calling their Operation in Charlotte, is done. They're moving on. And the Charlotte mayor said the same thing. ICE is out of town. We're going to work with our community to bounce back from this, everything. Then ICE weighs in, or DHS, and says, no, we're still here. We still got our operations going on. And so there's, even whether or not these arrests and sweeps are going to continue, people can't even agree about that. And it could just be a fact that, okay, the majority of these agents have moved on, but they are, Homeland Security has a presence in most major American cities, small offices here and there. So it could just be that they're saying, we still have some people here. Or who knows, maybe they're going to be ramping up the big raids again. Even just simple facts like that are in dispute these days.
You reported that the Trump administration officials were the source of some of this misinformation, but that they've also been working to fight back against some misinformation that's actually targeting them. Kind of give us some examples of this kind of back and forth.
Yeah, it's really been all over the place. And, we've been working really closely with spokespeople for the Department of Homeland Security and others to try to figure out just what is happening here, what is real, what is not. And for instance, there was this viral post from Charlotte that showed a man being wheeled away in a stretcher while a bunch of masked armed agents kind of looked on. The post said, ICE just shot a man in Charlotte. And, DH says, no one was shot. That man was arrested, and then he had a panic attack, and we brought him to the hospital. He was not shot. And so, there's an example of, the government helping clear up misinformation about, pretty, serious claims. But then on the other hand, the exact same spokesperson comes out and says that, the sheriffs here in North Carolina are holding on to 1,400 inmates who are also suspected, in addition to whatever crimes they've committed, also suspected of being in the country illegally. And there's just zero evidence for that. We asked her to explain where she was coming from with that, heard nothing, and there's just no proof at all that that is true. So it really highlights just the difficulty of wading through all of these things when, the same people that, both we as the media, but also the general public are depending on to clear up some of these things. In some cases, they are being helpful in providing the right information, and other times they are contributing to the spread of misinformation.
So this claim that there are over 1,000 criminals locked up in jails around the state who also happen to be here illegally, and local sheriffs won't hand them over. So where does something like that even come from? Is there any bit of truth to that at all?
It's really hard to tell because, like I said, they haven't answered our questions on this. It could be that they were misreading some data. And what happens when someone gets arrested and they're suspected of not being here legally is that the sheriffs are supposed to notify ICE and say, hey, we've got this guy or this gal that you might want to come and pick up. FYI. And then ICE, if they're interested, can say yes. Even if they bond out, even if their charges get dismissed and they're otherwise going to be let out of jail, don't let them out. Keep a hold on them. And, there are all sorts of court battles and legal disputes over whether that's not even constitutional. But that's just kind of how it operates while the courts figure out if they're allowed to do that or not. And so it could be the case that in the past, maybe even going back years, there have been a total of 1,400 of these requests that have been denied because some counties did used to deny those requests. Wake and Mecklenburg in particular, which is where ICE has been, probably no coincidence there. So it could just be that those are the amount that they've denied going back years and years and years. But right now, every single sheriff in the state is legally required to work with ICE. That is a new law that went into effect last year, actually over the veto of former Governor Roy Cooper, who tried to block it but was unsuccessful. And so we reached out to the Sheriff's Association here in North Carolina, and they said, no, we've gotten no complaints, no reports. We don't know what they're talking about, And so it seems that if there are any of these people still behind bars, it's because, ICE has failed to come and pick them up, not because the sheriffs have not let them go.
That's interesting. Hundreds of arrests here in North Carolina during this Operation Charlotte's Web. And we saw hundreds more arrested in Chicago before all of the attention shifted here to Charlotte and Raleigh. That takes, it seems, a lot of manpower to accomplish. And that's another topic of some of these claims that you investigated. Exactly.
It does. I mean, there are tens of thousands of federal agents doing these sweeps because, if you're arresting, 400 people in a day, you can't do that with just 400 cops. You need several thousand cops to do that. And then, multiply that by however many cities ICE wants to be in at any given time. You need a lot of people to do that. And ICE didn't have the staffing to do that. So what they had to do is reassign agents from other federal agencies. So about 1 in every 5 FBI agents is now an ICE agent. The DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, half of their agents have quit working drug cases and now just work for ICE. There's a group called HSI, which investigates basically like international criminal activity. So think, human trafficking rings, drug cartels, child abuse cases, terrorism, things like that. 90% of their staff, about 6,200 agents, have been transferred out of that agency and now work for ICE doing these immigration roundups. And so what we heard actually from a Democratic state Supreme Court justice here in North Carolina, Anita Earls, she said that these raids and this new attention under Trump on immigration is making us less safe because all of these FBI and DEA and HSI agents, tens of thousands of them, have gotten pulled off of, what she termed more serious work, more serious criminal cases to work on just rounding people up off the street. But obviously, not everyone agrees that, it is making us less safe. I mean, the reason that all of these agents were transferred is because Donald Trump, on his very first day in office, signed an executive order doing this. And he said, immigration and the immigrants who are here are endangering our security. Some of them, he said, are engaged in terrorist plots, but others are just committing other crimes. And while we have not been able to deport these people, that is going to be the highest priority of federal law enforcement. Everything else gets put on the back burner. And so, it's true that everyone has been moved to ICE, all these thousands and thousands of federal agents, but obviously lots of dispute over whether that is a good thing or not. The 2026 elections might show us more about what the American people think.
All right, well, let's take a break. And when we come back, we'll tackle some viral social media posts about traffic, kids skipping school, and what it may tell us about the number of immigrants in Charlotte and Raleigh. Stick around. All right, we're back. The Department of Homeland Security tweeted out a map of Charlotte when they were in town. And this had a pointed message. And what's so funny is I actually saw this, and I didn't understand the context of it. I was like, what are they doing with a map of Charlotte? I've never lived in Charlotte. I'm a Granville County native north of Raleigh. I have experienced Charlotte traffic, though. So
yes.
What does this tell us?
Well, Charlotte traffic, even for people from Granville County, you probably know that Charlotte traffic is real bad.
Yes.
And that's just kind of a constant fact about Charlotte that everyone who lives in or near Charlotte loves to complain about. It's a huge issue, honestly. And normally when you look at the traffic map around Charlotte, the commute, it's all red. You pull up your phone, you plug it wherever you're going into your GPS, and maybe a few of the roads are yellow, but it's mostly just red. Everything is just in a gridlock. And so DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, tweets out this map of that same kind of GPS map, but it's just all green. And
no slowdowns.
No slowdowns, and they say, you're welcome. So, and then actually Greg Bovino, who's kind of become the public face of a lot of these ICE raids around the country, and he's actually a North Carolina native, grew up in Boone, and he then tweeted about it as well and said, this just proves that the problem goes much deeper than anyone even expected.
Could that be tied to the lack of traffic there? There couldn't have been any other expounding circumstances with that?
Well, clearly the message was that you have, all of these immigrants who are, driving around and clogging up the roads. And, now that we have scared them all into staying at home today, because, a ton of businesses were closed in Charlotte and in Raleigh when this happened. Construction sites were empty, restaurants were shut down. And so, their message was, hey, your traffic problems could be solved if we just, got rid of all of these folks. So what we did was we reached out to DOT and we said, hey, is it true that they have solved traffic in Charlotte? And DOT actually tracks the stats, really granularly. Shout out to whoever the Department of Transportation puts this all together. But you could look at, any road, even the tiniest little roads, and they know exactly how many cars are going down that road every single day. And so what they told us was that in Charlotte, some roads when ICE was in town had a 1% drop in traffic, 2% drops in traffic. A couple had about a 7.5% drop in traffic. So it seemed to be a little bit less traffic in Charlotte, but it was not the, massive change that everyone thought it was. I don't know how they got that nice green map. Maybe they just took it early in the morning, the screenshot of it. But, 1% drop in traffic obviously is not going to do a whole lot. But, maybe 8%, that could free up some roads. So maybe there's a kernel of truth to what Homeland Security had to say there.
Maybe that, and maybe there was a pause on construction or something around 85 or something like that.
Could be.
Another thing that we'll have to further investigate. Okay, another popular post. This was made by top Trump advisor Stephen Miller, among others, pointed to the fact that tens of thousands of students were absent from school during these raids here in North Carolina. But you reported that those numbers weren't exactly what they maybe made them out to be.
Yes, and this is, again, very similar to this thing with the traffic, that there is probably a kernel of truth to this. It's not just coming out of nowhere, but it's also being blown way out of proportion. So in Charlotte, it was over 20,000 students who were absent from schools, which, seems like a massive number. And there's about 140,000 students in Charlotte schools. So it's about, little over 15% of the student body who's gone. So people said, 15%, of people living in Charlotte are immigrants who are living here illegally. And it's not that simple. Because if you look just at the averages on any given day, about 7 or 8% of students are absent because they've got, they're on vacation, they've got a doctor's appointment, they're sick, whatever. So there was an increase in absences, absolutely. But it was, a few thousand extra students than you would expect, not 20,000 extra students than you expect. And we saw the same thing in Wake County. The numbers in Wake County were smaller, which does also make sense because there's more Hispanic people living in Mecklenburg County than in Wake County. But you did see a bump in Wake County as well. But again, the total numbers, is not all just due to, Hispanic families pulling their children out of school for the day. There's also plenty of just normal absences.
Right. And we can't exactly say that everyone who is out of school is here illegally. There's no way to really point to that at all.
And frankly, it also just illustrates, to your point, the complication of just family dynamics when you start getting into this, because, there could be families where one parent is here legally, another parent is not here legally, and then the kid is a U.S. citizen. So with a family of 3 people, you have 3 different immigration statuses. And so it just, gets, very complicated when you look at those numbers. But yeah, we don't know why people pulled their kids out of school, but we do know that there was certainly an uptick in student absences, just, again, not quite as large as Trump administration officials were making it out to be.
Well, we hit on a lot of big topics and a lot of misinformation flying around. Thanks, Will Dorn, for trying to get to the bottom of it. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening. If you listen to this podcast on WRAL.com, remember you can listen anywhere you get your podcasts. That includes Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. Be sure to follow the show so you don't miss an episode.